Today, I want to talk about a generation that often feels invisible in the broader psychological conversat. Ian, yet carries one of the most fascinating mental blueprints of modern times. I am speaking about Xennials, those born roughly between 1976 and 1985. They are the bridge between two worlds. They are not quite Generation X, and not fully millennials. They are analog childhood survivors who stepped into a digital adulthood. To understand the psychology of Xennials is to understand what happens when a human mind develops in one reality and matures in another. Psychology teaches us that our early environment shapes the architecture of our thinking. The brain is not just a biological organ, it is a storyteller, constantly interpreting the world based on early experiences. Xennials grew up in a time of landline phones, handwritten notes, physical maps, Saturday morning cartoons, and waiting for film to develop. Their childhood socialization was slower, more face-to-face, less curated. Emotional regulation was learned without social media validation. Mistakes were not permanently archived online. Privacy was natural, not protected by passwords. Then something dramatic happened as their brains were finishing development in early adulthood. The internet exploded. Email replaced letters. Social media replaced photo albums. Smartphones replaced memory. This sudden environmental shift created a unique psychological duality. Neuroscience tells us that the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and impulse control, fully matures in the mid to late 20s. For Xennials, this maturation happened alongside the rise of digital culture, so their cognitive control developed. While adapting to a new technological reality, this is why Xennials often display both skepticism and adaptability. They remember a slower pace, yet they mastered rapid change. They understand life before constant connectivity, yet they function in a hyper-connected world. This dual exposure creates a psychological tension, nostalgia for simplicity combined with competence in complexity. When you observe a Xennial, you may notice certain behaviors that reveal this internal bridge. For example, many Xennials are cautious with social media. They might post less frequently or avoid oversharing. Psychologically, this often reflects on early conditioning around privacy and bound areas. Their childhood did not reward public exposure, so their nervous system does not equate visibility with validation. If a Xennial shares selectively, it often indicates an internal value system rooted in authenticity rather than performance. If, on the other hand, a Xennial heavily engages in digital validation, frequent posting, constant checking of notifications, anxiety over engagement, it may reveal an internal conflict. It can signal an unconscious attempt to reconcile their analog upbringing with digital expectations. The behavior might reflect a fear of irrelevance, a subconscious belief that staying visible equals staying significant in a fast-moving world. Another core psychological pattern among Xennials is self-reliance. Many grew up as latchkey kids, coming home to empty houses after school, managing their own time. This early independence strengthens problem-solving skills and internal locus of control. The belief that one's actions influence outcomes. When a Xennial handles stress quietly without asking for help, it often reveals deeply ingrained self-sufficiency. It may signal resilience, but it can also hide difficulty with vulnerability. The refusal to seek help is not always strength. Sometimes it is fear of burdening others. If a Xennial openly asks for support, expresses emotional needs, or seeks therapy, this often indicates psychological growth beyond generational conditioning. It suggests that the individual has consciously examined inherited beliefs about toughness and independence. It reflects emotional intelligence rather than weakness. Decision-making patterns among Xennials are also revealing. They tend to weigh options carefully, remembering economic instability, such as recessions that occurred during their early career years. Financial caution is common. If a Xennial hesitates before making major purchases or career changes, this is not necessarily indecisiveness. It often reflects lived experience of uncertainty. Their formative adult years were shaped by rapid corporate changes and economic volatility, creating a subconscious need for security. However, if a Xennial avoids risks entirely, staying in unfulfilling jobs, postponing dreams indefinitely, it may indicate anxiety rooted in transitional trauma. Living through dramatic societal shifts can create a persistent background fear that stability is fragile. Avoidance behavior can mask fear of loss rather than lack of ambition. Social interactions provide even more insight. Xennials typically value deep friendships over wide networks. Their social template was built in physical spaces, schoolyards, malls, neighborhoods. If they prefer small gatherings and meaningful conversations, this reflects attachment patterns formed before digital overstimulation. Their dopamine system was conditioned by sustained interaction, rather than rapid digital feedback loops. If a Xennial struggles with modern networking culture, finding it exhausting or superficial, it may signal cognitive overload. The brain adapts to its developmental environment. Rapid multitasking and constant digital engagement can create subtle stress responses in those who were not wired for it in early life. This does not mean they cannot adapt. It means adaptation costs energy. Romantic relationships among Xennials also reveal fascinating psychological dynamics. They often value loyalty and long-term commitment. Growing up before swipe culture, their romantic scripts were shaped by gradual connection. If a Xennial shows strong commitment orientation, it reflects emotional templates formed in a pre-instant gratification era. Yet, if they exhibit relationship anxiety, especially around communication gaps like delayed text replies, this can reflect digital era stress, layered onto analog attachment styles. Their nervous system did not evolve with constant accessibility. The expectation of instant response can trigger hypervigilance, even if consciously they understand rational explanations. One of the most profound psychological traits of Xennials is adaptability. Under pressure, they witness the shift from manual systems to automation. This builds cognitive flexibility, their ability to switch strategies when circumstances change. If a Xennial learns new software patiently or navigates career shifts pragmatically, it reflects neural pathways strengthened by repeated adaptation. However, chronic adaptability can also lead to exhaustion. Always adjusting can create identity diffusion, a subtle question of who am I in all this change. When a Xennial expresses nostalgia intensely, or frequently revisits childhood media. It may not simply be sentimentality. It can be an unconscious effort to anchor identity in something stable. Emotionally, Xennials often carry quiet resilience. They were raised in an era where emotional expression was less emphasized, especially for boys. If they struggle to articulate feelings, this does not mean they lack depth. It often indicates limited early modeling of emotional language. Psychologically, the emotion exists. The vocabulary may not. When a Xennial consciously practices emotional openness, attends therapy, or engages in reflective dialogue, this indicates psychological evolution. It shows integration of past conditioning with modern awareness. Integration is a sign of maturity, but there are side effects to being a bridge generation. Chronic comparison can emerge. Xennials compare upward to digitally native millennials and Gen Z who seem fluent in new platforms, and backward to Gen X who seem more detached from digital stress. This in-between status can create subtle identity insecurity, not fully belonging. To either category can activate feelings of invisibility. Invisibility affects self-esteem. When cultural narratives focus on younger or older groups, Xennials may feel overlooked. This can translate into overworking to prove relevance or withdrawing to avoid competition. Both behaviors stem from the same root, a desire for acknowledgement. Mental health struggles among Xennials often include burnout. They entered adulthood during rapid globalization and technological acceleration. Many juggle demanding careers with caregiving responsibilities for both children and aging parents. This sandwich generation effect increases chronic stress levels. Elevated cortisol over time impacts sleep, mood stability, and immune function. Anxiety in Xennials frequently presents as functional anxiety. They meet deadlines, maintain households, manage responsibilities, yet internally experience persistent tension. Because they were conditioned to handle things independently, they may not outwardly display distress. Psychologists look for microsigns: jaw clenching, shallow breathing, difficulty relaxing, irritability during downtime. Depression in this group can manifest as quiet disengagement rather than overt sadness. Loss of excitement, emotional numbness, or excessive nostalgia may indicate unresolved grief, not only personal grief, but grief for a simpler era. Societal transformation can trigger collective grief responses. Relationships may suffer when Xennials suppress stress. Partners might perceive emotional distance. Children may observe constant busyness. The internal belief, "I must handle everything," can reduce intimacy. Productivity can become identity. When worth equals output, rest feels unsafe. Psychologists analyze Xennial behavior through several lenses. Developmental history is crucial. We ask, what technological environment shaped early learning? What emotional norms existed in the household? D. What economic events influenced early adulthood? We observe patterns of adaptation. Does the person resist change or overadapt? Both extremes provide data. We examine language. Do they use phrases like "back in my day" frequently? That may signal unresolved attachment to past identity. Do they express fatigue about keeping up? That may indicate cognitive overload. We observe body language during discussions about technology or societal change. Tight posture or crossed arms may reflect defensive skepticism. Open posture and engaged eye contact may reflect confident integration. Triggers are revealing. If discussions about younger generations evoke irritation, it may reflect fear of obsolescence. If praise for resilience brings visible emotion, it may indicate unacknowledged pride mixed with exhaustion. We also assess coping mechanisms. Do they disconnect digitally to recharge? That is adaptive self-regulation. Do they binge scroll despite feeling drained? That may signal compulsive soothing behavior driven by stress. Subconscious signs often appear in humor. Xennials frequently use irony and self-deprecating jokes about aging or technology confusion. Humor can be a defense mechanism, softening anxiety about change. Ultimately, the psychology of Xennials teaches us something profound about human adaptability. When a person develops in one world and matures in another, the mind does not break, it bends. But bending repeatedly without reflection can create strain. The healthiest Xennials are those who integrate both identities. They honor their analog roots while embracing digital competence. They allow themselves rest from constant adaptation. They seek support without seeing it as weakness. If you are a Xennial, your psychological journey is not about choosing between past and present. It is about synthesis. You carry the memory of slower connection and the skill of rapid innovation. You understand patience and immediacy. Your task is not to prove relevance, but to embody balance. And for those who live, work, or love a Xennial, understand this. Behind their competence may be quiet fatigue. Behind their humor may be existential questioning. Behind their independence may be a longing to share the load. The mind is shaped by time, and Xennials were shaped by one of the most transformative eras in human history. They are living evidence that identity is not fixed. It evolves with context. When we understand the psychological layers beneath their behaviors, we do not just understand a generation, we understand the human capacity to adapt, to remember, and to reinvent without losing the core self. That is the psychology of Xennials, the science of being raised in yesterday and surviving in tomorrow, all while trying to remain whole today.